Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar of strategy platforms. The topic that we have today is, again, a topic focusing on strategy, but perhaps from a different perspective. It's the perspective of thinking abilities. How can thinking tools, and what we're going to discuss today is systems thinking, how it can actually upgrade the leadership capabilities and help us think in a better way about strategy. Today's world is a very complex world, and that's why it needs different types of thinking, not the standard way or what they call the traditional thinking. So thank you very much for attending, and we're going to go forward. At any point of time, if you have questions, this is expected to be an interactive presentation. So you might as well ask me a question if something is not clear as we move forward throughout the presentation. The agenda for today, we're going to quickly define what is strategy platforms and why we're doing this. And then we're going to go into the core of our topic today. What are systems? What does the system mean? What is system thinking? And what are some of the system thinking tools? And then we'll reflect a bit about what is the relationship between something called contextualization and leadership. And this is the kind of the entrance to the two applications or the two tools that we're going to talk about. So the first one is called the Cynefin Framework, and the second one is the Causal Loop Diagrams. And then we're going to conclude with a Q&A, a recap, and what will be next for strategy platforms. So this is going to be our agenda for tonight. Now, I'll give a brief about my profile, especially that the attendees did not attend webinar number one. So my name is Mohammed Marwan. I define myself through two perspectives on the professional side. First one is work, and I've been in four companies throughout my career, working on IT and business consulting with Scala Business Solutions, then different leadership roles within General Electric for around 12 years. Then I moved to a startup in the field of education technology called the Mentor. And then my last assignment was being the general manager for a company called Kadun in Saudi Arabia. Throughout my career, I've been mainly doing perhaps two things, either transforming or improving, whether it's through technology, through HR, through human capital, through management and leadership, different combinations of tools that enabled me to do that. And I think I'm always lucky and blessed to have traveled so many countries around the world, almost 30 countries. Now, the other side is the education. And I've been always passionate about, educating myself and not just improving my work, but improving my capabilities as well. So originally, I'm an industrial engineer from the American University in Cairo. Then I moved to project management and supply chain, got different certifications. I got 2 master's degree in supply chain and MBA. And then finally, I've concluded my doctorate degree around 2 months back. And because I love reading a lot, I also have a book that I wrote over the last 2 years, and it's already in the market. So basically, this is who I am, and this is what I would like to do from either a professional point of view or an education. And I like to give back as well. So I'm an instructor at the American University in Cairo. I teach supply chain and organizational management. So moving from myself to strategy platforms, so is the community around those sets of webinars. So it's a combination of two words, strategy and platform. So strategy is basically your choice to the future. How do you respond to a future challenge or a future opportunity? And this is basically strategy. Now, there has been, thousands of books around strategy with very complex definitions, but I think basically this is the one that I've learned over the last 15 years. It's how do you respond to your future, whether you as a person or you as a company with hundreds of thousands of employees all over the world. And then I combined with the strategy concept, the platform concept. So, a platform can be anything. It can be a software, it can be a raised level, it can be the platform through which you're waiting for the train or the metro. It can be a new way of looking at things. It can be actually a physical structure where people just meet and exchange ideas. So this is the strategy platform. It's the platform upon which we discuss so many things related to strategy. And we also do projects and workshops, as I will explain later. And our company is focusing on 6 main topics when it comes to strategy. Foresight, how do you see the future? How do you formulate strategy? And to formulate this strategy, you need a business architecture, and you also need to align your execution. In many cases, you need innovation, and this innovation can be through changing the business model itself. And of course, we never forget the people part, which is the human capital. So those are the 6 domains in which strategy platform is interested to raise the capabilities of the community overall, and especially the business world when it comes to strategy. So we'll not take more discussing myself and Strategy Platforms company. We'll go right away into the topic for today, which is systems thinking. Hussam, would you have any questions before I go ahead?
No, thank you. But I'm still grasping well, this is my first time to attend this these seminars. So yes, I'm grasping the idea. No, thank you. But could you please expand the presentation?
Expand the what?
The presentation itself, the sharing the file, because now I can see my screen half. I'm not sure if I can maximize yes.
Okay, just hold on. Okay. So let's start with today's topic, which is, I think it's a very interesting topic once you really deep dive into this. We're going to talk about what systems are, what systems thinking is, and then we'll conclude with complexity. This is going to be the first part of our webinar. Now, usually our webinars are done, we focus the first part on from a conceptual point of view, some principles, some theory, hints about application, and then usually the second half of the presentation is about the applications of those concepts. So this is how we usually conduct our webinars. Now, a system. There's one of the best quotes I've had about systems is something that was said by the creator of Node.js, which is a framework in programming for JavaScript. His name is Ryan Dahl, and he said something very interesting. He said, you can never understand everything. However, you should always understand the system. Okay, and it made me reflect a lot about what exactly did this mean. And it's actually a split between understanding, let's say if you're in a company and you have a process consisting of, 200 steps. It is very difficult to understand each and every step and what does it do and what is the input for this activity and the output and so on, especially when you go in upper levels like a manager or a leader. But it's very important that you understand how this whole thing works, what are the inputs and what are the outputs, because this gives you a better picture of what is actually going on. And the translation of this quote is what many people say, you need to look at the bigger picture. Actually, the bigger picture is the system, not the details, as we'll explain later. So moving from that, let's understand how did this idea about the systems come into place. Now, it all started with a German genius. His name was Ludwig von Bertalanffy. Last name is a bit difficult. And he was basically a scientist and engineer. And he had started to work with mathematical models in his own specialization, which was related to thermodynamics and those type of engineering applications. But then he, in his famous book called General System Theory, he threw a very insightful idea. He said that all the rules that apply to engineering and thermodynamics and chemistry and physics and all of those rules can actually be extended to education, sociology, organization, psychology, philosophy, and so on. And this is what actually sparked the application of systems, understanding what a system is and the mechanics inside a system, into all of those fields outside the classical fields of thermodynamics and engineering and so on. So this was the very first spark, and this was during the 20th century. He died in 1972. Then, based on this, lots of other researchers took the idea, and then when it started, the science of systems and systems thinking at a later stage. So let's go back to the very basic principles, which is what is actually a system. Now, there are hundreds of definitions of what a system is, but I picked a few here. So the first one says that the system is more than the sum of its parts. So if you have something that's composed of, let's say, 5 components, when this combination of components work, they actually produce something more than those 5 components. That's a differentiation between the different parts and the final sum that comes out. Another definition is a complex whole. Okay, so a system needs to be one at the end, regardless of the number of components inside. But eventually, when you look at it, you look at the big picture. Another definition as well is that it produces, a system generates behaviors. So there are always outcomes from those systems. And here are 3, simple examples. The car engine is a system on its own, has hundreds of components inside. Fuel comes from one side, and then the motion of the car is produced. Same thing goes for a projects team, interaction between hundreds or thousands of people working on a project. Even something as small as the beehive, where all the bees are inside, that's another system as well. There's the interaction between the bee, the other bees, the hive itself, the sugar, the production of the honey, all the other insects as well, and so on. So it's an example of a very interesting system, I would say. Moving forward, we look into other definition of what actually qualifies as a system. Long story short, there are 3 criteria that make something a system. First of all, as you see in the blue box, it needs to have components. So there needs to be multiple components inside, at least 2. There can be thousands or millions, and they have to work together somehow. So this is criteria number 1. Now, number 2 is that those components, they need to have interconnections, and sometimes called interactions as well. So they interact together so that the system can generate its function, which is, as you can see in the orange box. So the system is actually in place to achieve a specific objective or a purpose. So the car engine needs to produce movement. The beehive needs to produce honey. The solar system needs to make sure that it's always running and that those people on Earth are alive. The Earth rotates, the sun is around, the Earth is around the sun, all of those stars, the moon, and so on. It has a function that it should always be up and running so that all the creatures on this planet are up and running as well. So I would advise you to look at everything around you and actually define what is the system, what is not, but always ask yourself, what is actually the function of this system? And that is why this picture is very important. That's very funny as well. Now you can see the thousands of parts on the left side of the screen. Those are just parts from the car. Okay, so it satisfies number 1, which means that there are multiple components. Okay, the doors, the tires, the engine, the fender, the gears, everything. However, there are no interactions at all between those parts. So it doesn't qualify as a system. What qualifies as a system is the car on the right-hand side. Now, when this red car, everything is assembled, the interconnections and the interactions are in place, then it becomes a system and it has a function, which is transporting people from one place to the other. This is this is something very foundational to agree on the definition of the system itself. Now, there can be different representations for systems. Okay, there is no specific way to represent the system. So you can see this is the cross section of a car engine. This is an interface of a software application or a platform. And on the right-hand side, you can see the entire global food system, which is a very, very complicated one. However, it is still the system because all of those millions or maybe billions of interactions between the different components. So these are how different systems would look like. We move one step ahead, and in the same way we defined what are the 3 criteria for a system, we also define what are the 4 hierarchies of any system. Okay, so it goes in this way. You define what the system is, because you know in reality there are no systems defined. What does this mean? It means that we the human beings, we are the ones who define the system. You can say that the city that you're living in is a system, and those are the boundaries. But you can say that maybe the street you're living in is a system, or maybe your apartment with your family is a system. Maybe Earth is a system. Maybe the solar system is a system. So there are no definitions in nature about the system is. It is us who define where does the system begin and where does it end. And this is the one in green that you see over here. So you define the system. And then any system consists of many subsystems. You can have 1 level or 100 level or 1,000 until you reach the point where interaction takes place. So what we discussed before as interactions or interconnections between the different parts of the system, like in the car, for example, the interaction is between the components of the car itself. This is where you stop. And this is where the elements start interacting with each other to generate the function of the system. And after you finish those 3, you always define the big box, the environment. Okay, so this environment is usually outside the system. So we go back to the example. Let's say if you define your city, so the environment might be the whole country. If you define the country, the environment might be the continent, okay? And so forth and so on. If you define the Earth as a system, then maybe the environment is the solar system. If you define the solar system, the environment might be the entire galaxy, and so on. So this is also another basic understanding of systems, that you define what the system is, where are the different sub-elements, subsystems, and then then you define the elements where interaction takes place, and you always define the boundary where is the environment surrounding those systems. Okay, I'll pause here for a second, and for the attendees, if there are any questions.
So far, so good. We're still defining the system and how it interacts with all the components interact, and then move forward to the environment. Yeah, excellent.
Okay, good. Now let's go one step further. Now we have defined what a system is. Let's go to the core of today's webinar, which is what system thinking is. Okay. Now, traditional thinking has always been defined as a linear type of thinking. So it goes from one point to the other. It analyzes cause and effect in one direction. So there is one interaction between element A and B. A causes B, and then perhaps B causes C, and so on. And there are actually the majority of people, they usually think in this way, very binary, linear, cause and effect type of thing. Now, system thinking is designed in a way that you understand more about the system. You understand more about the interactions. As you see, there's a big difference between the blue diagram on the right, which is systems thinking, where you are thinking actually in terms of interaction, versus thinking just between 2 parties or 2 elements. System thinking has always been found very handy when you want to understand complex situations, okay? Linear thinking doesn't help a lot, okay? But when you want to understand the interactions in a company, when you want to understand the different dynamics when an aeroplane is flying, when you want to understand what is going on with climate change and what is the effect of carbon emissions on the temperature, on the clouds, generating hurricanes and so on, all of this needs a bigger picture approach or a systems thinking approach to really see what is going on in this overall system, not just picking it one by one. And this is what we call systems thinking. You can think of all of those interactions together. One of the best examples of where systems thinking help a lot is the organization design or looking into organization charts. When you design a new organization or change or do restructuring, in many cases, the teams or the HR who are doing this, they think in a very stiff, linear approach, and they think about the org chart. So one box, two boxes, three boxes, and so on. And this is how they design the organization. So marketing, there's a marketing leader, and then there are maybe 2 senior managers, and then there are maybe 8 marketeers, and so on. Very linear, very rigid type of thing. And the approach here is by function. You just want to have a box with a function and the department. But actually, the intelligent way of designing an organization is what they call design for interactions. Okay, it is not necessarily that this kind of org chart with, I don't know, 100 boxes in a pyramid sort of things is the best way to design an organization from an interactions point of view. Okay, because maybe this makes the interaction very difficult. It reduces the speed of information sharing. It makes information sharing of less quality. Maybe it makes the organization very stressful, okay, and with lots of politics and not very customer oriented and so on. When you have a systems thinking approach, you actually start to design it from an interactions perspective. And then the concept of a function or a department, I would not say that it disappears, but it becomes much less important than just having the old style. So, and actually systems thinking helped me a lot in when I got into situations that are really difficult to get through. I use it, try to get a bigger picture. I look at the interactions instead of the linear approach. So let's go one step forward and understand a very important concept that we'll use later, which is analysis versus synthesis. Now, we all know analysis. We take something and we keep breaking it down. Let's say root cause analysis is a very good example of analysis, or breaking down X into half X and half X, and then you keep going down, because as you see here on the slides, your target is the element. Okay, it's a top-down approach, and you want to go to, and that's why they call it's a reductionist approach. You keep on reducing until you get to the lowest element, and this is where your efforts are going. Now, on the other side, synthesis is the opposite. Synthesis is where you take part 1, part 2, and then it combines into a third part. And then this third part combines with something else to create something bigger. And then you go bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is what we call the synthesis itself. Why? Because your target is, as in the first slide, you want to understand the whole system. So you don't go into the details of each and every element. No, you keep building the system until you understand it fully, going all the way up. And even synthesis sometimes is used in writing or research. So you might have an idea, I might have an opposite idea. When they come together, they produce a third idea. And then we take this third idea, we combine it with something else, and we produce something bigger. So in short, analysis is usually when you keep on going down to the element level, synthesis and when you start going up. And of course, this needs lots of practice, because sometimes we tend to just go down and try to find a root cause, or we want to know the problem is with Marwan or this, or we want to find what is the cost of element ABC. Synthesis is the other way around. You don't care about all of those details. You want to have a coherent view of the system itself. So those were some concepts about how do we actually look at systems. And the best quote always for systems thinking is the following: don't miss the forest for the trees. You can have a forest and you can keep looking at every one of the millions of trees in the forest. All what you see is maybe 1024 trees, okay? But you miss that this is a forest. If you keep looking at the trees, this is the analysis or the reductionist approach. But if you finally see the entire forest, then this is more of a systems thinking, or as they call it as well, a holistic approach for your situation. Good. Okay, so those are some concepts about systems and systems thinking. Now, where is before that, one very important tool in systems thinking, and this is one of the most applicable and used tools in in different consulting and coaching sessions and so on, which is called the iceberg model. And it applies to all of us. What we usually see goes this way. The first step is you see an event itself. So something happened. I caught a cold, or I met someone and he smiled, or I was driving the car and I had an accident. Whatever it is, this is the tip above the iceberg, and this is where we usually, as you see on the right, this is where we react. Something happened and we just react. But actually, to start going deeper, you need to understand, what is the pattern? What is going on over here? What is the cause of this accident? What are the surrounding circumstances around it? So in this case, you say, I've been catching more cold when sleeping less. Okay, so this is a pattern here. Okay, it is beyond just that. Maybe I was warm and there was a cold current and I just got a cold and you stop here. No, you try to dig deeper and actually understand more. So you go from the level of the event to the level of the pattern. And then you go to a level which is defined as underlying structures. Okay, what are the relationships and what is going on that creates a repetition of this pattern? Okay, so in this case, I'm not eating well. I have more stress at work. I don't have any healthy food around the office. And this is where, you see that there is a structure creating all of this. It's not just one reason, root cause in the linear way. No, there's something deeper than all of this. And then at the end, you start to have a certain mental model. Okay, mental model is the lowest level of understanding, which enables you to transform. What does this mean? It means when you have this mental model and you really understand fully what is going on, you are able to transform, as you see at the lower part of the slide. This relates to the beliefs that you have. Okay, is healthy food important or not? Do I need to really change my sleeping habits or not? Is this work the right place for me or not? And based on understanding this bigger picture, maybe you can find, just because you had a cold, that this job is not the right job for you. Okay, this is where you get to the system of beliefs, and this is where this model enables you to transform. And this is one of the most important things, again, in terms of strategy. Strategy, when we say it's a response to a future challenge, it's not just the challenge you see as an event. So let's say a competitor opened a new branch. That's an event. Okay, but actually what is behind this event? It can be that they have been opening new shops every month. What is the pattern going on here? They are getting investments every 6 months. What is the underlying structure? They are doing a huge initiative with the government, which enables them to do X, Y, Z. And you keep going further until you find that the industry that you're in is going to transform, within 2 years, it will not exist anymore. This is exact system thinking, going just beyond an event or a component until you understand the bigger picture. So my advice, always have the iceberg model. The event are what you see, but then there are 3 layers where you actually don't see, the ones that are under the water. What are the domains where system thinking is a must? And it's going to be very difficult that you approach problems or challenges or try to find opportunities without having a systems thinking mindset. Now, as you see, those are complex domains, and we'll understand very soon what complexity is. So environmental sciences and social sciences, all the natural world around us, and the interactions of so many people as well in society or in the environment. Healthcare is another complex domain. When you want to do business transformation or organization restructure, you have to think about tens or hundreds of elements interacting at the same time. Cost, budget, labor law, your best employees. What are they going to do if you downsize the organization? How are you going to restructure the department? All of those things, they require a systems thinking approach. In many cases, project management, complex projects require a systems thinking approach, because when the complexity of the project goes up, it doesn't become linear anymore. It becomes very complicated. And that is why it requires a project manager or a director or even a program director who can see the whole picture of the project and what is going on. National policies, when a country wants to change a policy related to health insurance or taxes, they need to have a systems thinking approach. So those are just examples of some domains where without systems thinking, the process itself is going to be flawed. It's going to be very restricted, and the output is not going to be a good output. Finally, we've been talking throughout this that systems thinking helps us with addressing complexity. So it's important to understand what really complexity is, because it can have different meanings. It also has different meanings in different languages. So again, I'm summarizing a definition that I find very applied, where complexity is the lack of clarity to understand, plan, or act. Okay? If you don't have this kind of clarity to do any one of those 3, we usually say, as you see on the blue box on the right side, this is very complex. So what actually makes us think that something is complex? There might be too many interactions and relationships that we don't understand. So we just say it's complex. Something new comes up, what they call an emerging behavior, something that was not there before, and all of a sudden you are surprised by this behavior. From an organization, from a person, from a family, from a product, whatever it is. And then you might tag this as a complex because you were never prepared for this new behavior. You feel that there are unknowns, but actually you don't know them. And this is what we call as ambiguity. Something is going wrong here, but you don't know actually what is going wrong. So we automatically tag this as complex. In many cases where there are too many players, it becomes complex, because we as humans, we also have our capacity to understand how we can deal with all of those teams. Now, imagine, let's say, a football team, they have 11 players. Imagine if there were 20 players in the field. It's going to be very complex, and you will not be able to follow up where the ball is going and who scored the goal and so on. And one important thing about tagging something as complex is that you don't have a fitting model. We as humans, we always have models in our brain, and we fit this into them. So if it's a construction project, we know what is the WBS for a construction project. If it's if we look at a car, we know what a car does and what will be the maximum speed, and is it using electricity or using fuel, and so on. But then when you are faced with something that actually doesn't fit into any of the models that your brain has, usually call it right away, it's very complex, I don't understand, and then you start generating negative feelings, because in many cases, complexity is a negative feeling. We'll understand later how complexity can be good, but usually complexity is a negative tag to what we see in front of us in our world. So with this, we covered the first part of the presentation, which is about what are systems, what is systems thinking in brief. I mean, this is kind of a brief overview, because something as this would take perhaps a course of 1 or 2 days. And we understood the definition of complexity just enough to keep us going throughout the presentation. I'll pause here for a while, and I'm open to any questions. Sam, would you have any questions you'd like to ask?
No, but so far we've been talking about the systems thinking definitions. Yeah, let's move on if you're okay.
Good. Okay, so let's move on now. And now we covered those topics. Now we get into understanding what is context, how do leaders interact with context, and we'll start our first application. Now, to understand the world around us, okay, something very important for leaders when they lead companies or they're trying to formulate strategies, which is something called contextualization. Now, this means that you need to understand the context. As the definition here says, they are the circumstances around an action or an idea, okay? So let's say I tell you a joke, and I find it very funny, and you don't find it funny at all because you are missing the context. Somebody has informed me about this context. Now, the context can be cultural, can be scientific, can be an event that happened 2 days ago, but it's very important that when a new leader gets into a company, they really understand what is going on. You know, this is like the street definition of context, okay? How does this company operate? Why do they behave in this way? Why nobody's talking to anybody during the lunch break? The same applies when you move even to another country, is how do you place the events or meanings in the right context, okay? Somebody not smiling to you now, is this a bad thing or a good thing? Culturally, what does this mean? Now, why is this important? Because to formulate the right strategy and make the right decisions, as we'll just see in a moment, is extremely linked to contextualization. If you're unable to understand what is going on, what is the context here, what is the system trying to tell me, you will not make good decisions. You will not have good stories to tell your employees or your team. Actually, nobody will trust you because you tend to be like, like a robot who doesn't understand the context. And this is, by the way, one of the challenges for AI, is that still there is a big gap that artificial intelligence does not understand context. And this is what, part of the dangerous journey with AI, if they get to what is called artificial general intelligence or contextual AI, then they're going to have the same advantage that humans have. They understand what is going on, they understand the culture, they understand the interactions between employees in a company or between the government and the people. They understand why are people behaving this way, and then it can compete with humans. And in many cases, from my experience, is that when you have a problem with the strategy execution, part of that is that the leaders did not spend enough time at the beginning understanding what was the context of this company, because strategy is not just something that you pick up and you apply it right away. It's not an operating manual, okay? But you need to understand what is the context behind this strategy, and then you start doing your action plan or your transformation plan. Okay, so how do we help leaders with contextualizing? This is where I'm introducing something called the Cynefin Framework, which was developed by a scientist and an expert in management and other teams. His name is Dave Snowden. He's originally from Wales. He was a management and technology expert with IBM for a very long time. And he came up with this framework sometime in 2007 with another scientist as well, which is something called the Cynefin Framework. Now, what is this Cynefin Framework? What is the relationship between leadership, decision-making, and what we call understanding the context? Now, this is the framework, and it is tagged as a leadership decision-making framework. Now, when leaders get into a situation or a context, in many cases, they make wrong decisions because they didn't really understand what is going on. And many leaders, sometimes they just jump into what they are programmed on. So let's say there's an issue with a specific spare part in a car for a global company. Okay, just there was something wrong with manufacturing, replace the part. However, this is the wrong contextualization. You need to really understand what is going on over here. The cases that happened with Boeing over the last 2 years, I'm sure there were many things in context missed, because it was not just a technical issue or a spare part issue or the component for the doors on the 737. No, there was something wrong with the company, something wrong with the quality team. Looks there were some practices that were not followed in the right way. The workers were upset. They did not want to renew their contract. So, it's something much, much bigger than just an engineering component that failed. So what Snowden came up with, and here I'll use the annotation, are 4 different contexts that any leader can face. The first one, and I'll go into explain every one of them clearly. The first one is a clear or a simple domain. Everything is clear, and you just go into the problem one by one. What does this mean? It means that you have best practices to solve the problem. Okay, and this, for example, let's say the tire of your car broke down. You look into it. You need to change it. You take out the old tire. You replace the new tire, and that's it. Then you move one step up, which is the complicated. Now, complicated is where good practices come into place. Now, what does this mean? It means that it means the following. It means that you might eventually know the answers, but you don't have any unknowns. And take an example for this is the car or the airplane. Now, as complicated as it is, but you still have all the unknowns. With very high accuracy, what happens on the plane, the interaction between the parts, how does the engine work, how does the change in temperature affect the wings, and so on. So this is kind of a complicated situation. Then you move to the complex, where you're not sure what is going on at all. Okay, you can see interactions, you might guess, but then you have something called exaptive practices, which is something that you trial and error sort of thing. And then finally, you get into the chaotic situation where you don't know what to do. You try something, it doesn't work. You try something else. Sometimes you don't try anything at all until the situation clears itself. Now, let's see some applications of this to make it, more clearer for you. Okay, let's go. Okay, so this is the clear domain. What you do in the clear domain is that you sense, you categorize, and you respond. So imagine a contact center, you get a call, okay? So you sense what is the problem according to the customer. You categorize it that it's a router issue or a software issue or a hardware issue, and then you respond right away, okay? Very straightforward, very linear. Cause and effect are obvious, and usually the kind of evaluation is that either it worked or it did not work. Okay, this is the clear domain. Okay, now when the difficulty starts going up is when you have a complicated domain, and the key here is that you have known unknowns. Okay, so there is something that you don't know really, but you're working on that. You don't have surprises. Okay, you know that you need to come up with this answer, or you need to understand why are the employees on the 5th floor behaving this way. You don't know the answer, but you know that there is a problem over there. And here, as a leader, what you need to do, as you see on the top, is to sense, analyze, and respond. So you see what the problem is. Remember, compared to the previous one, you categorized it right away because you know the answer and then you responded. Here, you sensed, you analyze the situation, and then you start responding. And that is why it's the cause and effect are usually predictable. They're not known 100%, but they are kind of predictable. Okay, so the most important thing here is to really analyze the situation. There are no perfect answers, but you tend to work on a specific direction. And one example of this is, engineering type of components. This is where things really start to become difficult. Now, in a complex domain, you don't know what you don't know. So, one example in interactions in society, okay, the prices are going up, people are not happy, the interactions become more difficult, and then it starts, escalating as we go. Now, you don't know actually how to program this. The thing about complex situation is that it's very difficult to make models for them. And the same goes for, the climate, the weather, and so on. Now, the cause and effect, you have a partial understanding. Say maybe, I'm not sure, maybe this defines half the problem, but the other problem is something else and you don't know. And that is why there is no much of analysis on the complex side. You start probing and seeing what is going on, a bit of trial and error, and then you start sense what the problem is, and then you respond. Now, is it going to be the right solution or not? Actually, in many cases, you don't know, okay? Because you don't have the same strength and understanding of complicated situations and simple situations. And this is very clear, as the application here says, social systems and business domain. This is what we face every day in our life, in our community, in our companies, with our teams. Human beings, by design, they are complex creatures. So when they interact with each other, it becomes even more complex. And then the last part, which is super difficult, is when you are in chaos, okay? A natural disaster happens and you don't know when is it going to end. You don't know the level of damage that happens. You might not know even what is the reason that the damages are so high. So you tend to stay for a while, or you might even act right away because you have to act. Let's say a fire broke up. You have to go and try to extinguish the fire with water or with clothes and so on. But you actually don't know the reason. There is nothing to learn now, and you're just responding. Whether this will result in a solution or not, you don't know. And you even actually don't know the relationship between cause and effect. Okay, in the complex situation, it was partial, but in a chaos, you cannot understand those types of relationship. So the Cynefin framework was one of the a very known framework for leadership. especially on decision making and especially for senior leaders to understand when they get into a situation, what is it exactly? Is it simple? Is it complicated? Is it complex? Or is it chaotic? Because based on that, as a leader, you will make the decision. So one application I'm explaining over here, which is very interesting because it's from the field of project management and stakeholder analysis. Now, you can come into the why I'm saying it's interesting, because you might think Cynefin Framework is a bit philosophical, but it's not philosophical at all. It's very practical. And how you use this framework to apply to project management. So this was one of the researches done, and it's a real case on if you want to apply stakeholder analysis and you have different types of projects. So let me explain how does this work. These are the 4 domains of the Cynefin framework. Okay, so this is a simple project, a complicated one, a complex, or even a chaotic one. Forget about this order for now. This is it's too complicated. Now, the question is, if you are a project director, how do you handle stakeholders in every one of those domains? Stakeholder engagement or stakeholder management is one of the most important things for any project director. So how do you handle your stakeholders? The customers, the governments, the suppliers, your team, the competitors, the client themselves. How do you handle them in all of those four domains? So let's say about the stakeholder topic itself, and you are in a chaotic situation, okay? What might happen is that the identity of the stakeholders, you might even don't know them. You don't know who your stakeholders are, okay? And you find that there are lots of interactions between those assumed stakeholders, very chaotic and noisy, and people are quarreling with each other, and you don't know whether this is a stakeholder or not. So you're definitely unable to come up with a communication plan, stakeholder analysis, and you follow the standard project management stakeholder situation. Let's take how to manage your stakeholders. Now, as you see, in the case of simple, it is the standard way, for example, like in the PMP certification about stakeholder analysis. You identify, you map, you monitor, and so on. The very standard process that we all know. Identify whether the stakeholder is interested in the project or has power, if this, do that, if this, do that. When you have this kind of cause and effect, it's very linear, okay? But when you get to something more complicated, like in this case, for example, you have to start to do trade-off between the preferences. You start seeing that, yes, it's not a simple situation, okay? But you need to have a more structured or advanced way of managing those stakeholders, because it's not the simple way that we all do. And that is why many projects fail, because we tend to think that a project of 5 people, you need to manage it in the same way of a project with 100 people, okay? And this is wrong, even from a mathematical point of view. When you handle even the stakeholder challenges, something that happens in complex stakeholders is assume that they only look at financial metrics, okay? Every time you have a meeting with them, they ask for financial metrics, the cost of the project, the percentage of completion, the revenue, and so on. You need to handle this in a different way if there is improvement, but the only thing they understand are numbers or dollars. When you want to look for interaction between the stakeholders, and let's say you are in a chaotic situation, you don't know who's who on the stakeholders. So maybe what you just need to do is that you approach to reach as many stakeholders as possible. You're in a chaotic situation. You don't know. So as we sometimes say, we spray and pray. send this email to the 1,000 people, maybe there are 20 stakeholders in them. So I find this very interesting is that we are sometimes managing a company or a project or whatever we're managing. And we're finding difficulties in handling the situation. In many cases, this difficulty comes that we really don't understand the context. We don't know that actually this is a complex organization, or maybe the company is chaotic, and there is no way we manage it in the same way we manage something, very process-oriented, as if it's business as usual. And this is where the leaders face the challenge. They think that they go in a situation where it's business as usual, but then they try to manage a very complex situation in the same way. It doesn't work. They face lots of difficulties. They get frustrated. Their team gets frustrated, and maybe at the end they lose their job because of lack of performance, for example. So there are many other applications, by the way, for the Cynefin framework, but I thought that this is the closest one to, if I'm a project director, and especially if it's a big, complicated project, it's very important that every day I have an issue with the stakeholder. I map this, where am I exactly? Is it a simple business as usual? Or this is a situation that will be chaotic by tomorrow? I need to interact in a certain way. So that's application actually number one. Application number two is another tool of systems thinking, which is very important, which is called the causal loops. And the question here, any one of the attendees or Hussam, did you work with causal loops before?
No, probably I don't know exactly because things are you can find some context here and you link it to some tools you've been using before. But Mohammed, I have a question here really. So far we have defined the system thinking and then Cynefin as a tool, right? For what? For formulating the strategy? Because what we have been talking so far is I'm having difficulty linking all the definitions together in one direction,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know at the end of the purpose. Is it to formulate a strategy, or we're talking here about execution? And the formulation itself has different steps or different best practices. When you think about the strategy, you look forward. You have to analyze many things: internal, external, macro, micro, and all of these analysis. All of this analysis that you have to do before you conclude your strategy or have at least a blueprint of what needs to be done.
Okay.
Yes. Can we have to link things together before we jump to the next example?
Sure. No, it's a great question, and actually, it proves you're following up exactly. Now, in the webinar 2 weeks back, we were talking about the strategy formulation through foresight tools. Okay. So what is foresight tools? It means how do you look into the future, okay, and see what are the trends coming. And this is one of the very important inputs to the strategy process. Okay. Now, the strategy process, as you said, of course, it has different inputs. You need to see what's coming up in the future, the trends, the current trends in the market, assess your capability, review your current structure. Where do you want to be? What is your plan to win? What are your capabilities? And based on all of this, you come with a strategy. Okay. So that's number one. Now, number two, to be able to do, I would say, most of these, you need to have a systems thinking mindset. Because if I come and tell you, let's say, the current trends that will happen in 3 years from now is, let's say, digital currency, rise in climate change, and I don't know, a drop in taxes, for example. Okay, this is what's going to happen 3 years from now. And you need to factor this to come up with the strategy. Now, you will not be able to find the connections between a digital currency, drop in taxes, and climate change, the temperature is going up, unless you have a systems thinking mindset. You're able to really look into all of these with your team, and of course, with the right tool, maybe with consultants, whatever, and say, you know what, the combination of all of these looks like we're going to have scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, and based on that you start building your strategy. Now this is point number 2. Point number 3, back to this presentation, the role of the Cynefin framework is to understand the context and give you some ideas how you will react. Okay, so it can apply to strategy, it can apply in a time of crisis. Okay, so some leaders, they always simplify things. You have a catastrophe, but they just go back to how they are programmed, and they just say, okay, send the project manager, they will fix the issue. But if leaders are unable to contextualize what is going on, actually, they will, and this from my experience, 100% come up with the wrong strategy. So a leader comes and they don't understand actually the context of the company or the context of the country they're in. And they have a certain strategy mandate from the headquarters. We need to do 1, 2, 3. If they don't have the right way to connect the dots, because system thinking is about connecting the dots. Okay. This is a situation for the country. There might be a problem here. The country is getting into from a complicated to a complex to a chaotic situation. And he or she ignores all of this and just continue with the strategy from the headquarters. Definitely there's going to be a disaster. And many leaders don't spend time actually understanding what is going on. Okay, they're just programmed into, come to their desk, the Excel sheet, the numbers, the growth multiplied by X%, reduce the workforce by 5% to save money, and that's it, business as usual. But this is not how the world goes. And that is why, by the way, there are so many leaders. If you follow many of the big company, maybe excluding the very big ones, like the Google and Microsoft and so on, there are so many leaders that are failing because the world is changing so fast. They are not used to have this, what do you call it, very high cognitive load. By the way, I'm not saying that any of this is easy. No, it's not easy at all. But the world is becoming more difficult, right?
Right.
So there is now on the leaders today, there are more cognitive load on their brain than maybe 10 or 20 or definitely 30 years back, where things were, yes, there were changes, there were pressures from work, but it was more of, to a big extent, a linear world. You can still, take it step by step, one step leading to the other, but not from a systems thinking approach. And that is why as well, I mean, and this is what we're trying to do in strategy platforms. There are so many leaders who did not take any training in handling complexity. They don't actually know if the situation is complex or not. They just, if go back to the definition of complexity, because they don't have experience, because this is new, because they just say this is too complex. Okay, now maybe, but how are you going to handle this complexity? Now, complexity is a science. It has its cultural part, it has scientific part, it has its management part, and it has also a kind of a neuroscience way, because we as humans, we dislike complexity because it makes our life difficult. So this is what we're trying to do here. I hope I have answered the question.
Right. Yeah, I have a better understanding now.
Okay.
But I'm confused about is it super? These techniques are super for formulating or from execution. As far as I understand it, it's more on the analysis when we are still formulating. Because,
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Right.
No, you're 100% right, because
Yeah.
the issue is, and another great point from you. Now, sometimes strategy fails because of execution issues. Okay.
Right.
Not the right resources, not enough money.
Yeah.
you know what happens. However, there are many cases where the strategy itself from the beginning is not the right one. The formulation process was delivered with issues. Why? Because the understanding behind it was wrong.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you one example we discussed also last time. You know the company, the rental company, Hertz.
Yeah.
Hertz had a strategy 2.5 years back that they're going full speed ahead with buying, I don't know how many tens of thousands of Tesla cars. And they said our strategy is to replace our fleet with Tesla.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A new CEO came, he made this decision. This is the way forward. This is our strategy. Okay. 2 years later, this happened March this year. So it's even less than 2.5 years. The CEO was fired. The whole strategy failed. Okay. And they're reversing the whole thing. Now, what happened? The market didn't behave as they expected. The depreciation of the Tesla cars was really very high. Okay. So the value of the car dropped significantly. They went very quickly. Okay. And they eventually found that this is not the best strategy for a car rental company. Now, this is not necessarily an execution issue, okay? Because at the end, it's not a very complicated process. You sell the standard car, you buy a Tesla, you lease it in a certain way, and that's it. It's not a very complicated business model. But the thing is that this was the wrong direction from the beginning, anticipating that this is the solution. Tesla's price will not drop. And also, by the way, it's not just the issue with the depreciation. It was the issue that even the new Tesla car, Elon Musk had to drop it because of the competition from the Chinese cars.
Correct. Yes.
So the whole thing was a failure from day one because the thinking process was wrong. And many leaders tend to simplify things, either because they're under pressure, their brain is not that intelligent, they don't have the right information, they don't have the right team, they don't have a foresight process to say, okay, what will happen 3 years from now? Is this a scenario that is acceptable, or am I gambling? I think the Hertz case was gambling. Okay.
Yeah. It's
Something
clear that
yeah.
Right. It's clear that they did not test it very well. They did not drive this strategy because you cannot just have a strategic decision and just follow it blindly. You have to maneuver, you have to sense what's going on the ground. You have to change every now and then your strategy itself. You have to review it. And then also it has, any strategy has its parts in financial, operational, and all the important parts. And we have to understand where it is, how it's impacting. Is it really leading us to the objective, or it's, but apparently with the case of Hertz, things moved very quickly. So they couldn't really, I'm not sure what did happen exactly. But yes, like a kind of surprise to them or something. He did not maneuver it, not
They did
drive.
not do the
Yeah,
exercise the right way.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, good. So what are causal loops? This is one of my favorite tools that I came across maybe 6 years ago. And causal loops are one of the systems thinking tools to really understand what is going on. Okay, so what are causal loops? And their name is Causal Loop Diagrams, CLD. Now, as we explained maybe 1 hour ago, systems are about interactions, things interacting with each other. They have connections, they have interactions, they have dynamics. So there needs to be a way to visualize what is actually going on in a system. So if I want to say, let's say we go back to the Hertz example. If we want to visualize how will the effect of adding new electric vehicles have an effect on cost, have an effect on the number of customers who want to rent Hertz car, and so on. It cannot be just, a discussion. Yes, I think it's a good idea. Maybe they will increase, maybe they will not. There needs to be a way to represent the system, okay? And then going back to the systems thinking point of view, there are two types of feedback loops that explains interaction. One is a positive feedback loop, which is called R, which means reinforcing. A positive feedback loop, it means the following, that let's say Hussam gives me money, I invest it, I win, I give Hussam back his share. So now Hussam has more money. So he gives me back money, I invest it, I'm richer, Hussam is richer, and this keeps on going forever. Okay, so this is what we call a positive feedback loop. Let's say if you see this example here, the number of cattle running. Now, let's say you have a herd of cows or animals. They are panicked. Maybe there is a hunter, maybe there is a lion, whatever. So they panic increases, they run, okay, and then they run faster. More cattle are running because they're afraid, their panic increases, and so on. And this loop keeps on forever until something happens to stop it. Maybe they fall from a cliff, or maybe the lion disappears, or whatever. This is a simple example of a positive feedback loop. It keeps on increasing or it keeps on decreasing. Yeah, it depends on which direction you're going. The other very famous one is the thermostat loop, which is the negative feedback loop. Okay, what does it mean? It means that you set the thermostat to a specific temperature at home, let's say 22 degrees. Okay, and the temperature in the room is 24. So the AC keeps working to reduce it from 24 to 22. Once it reaches 22, the cooling stops. So after some time, the 22 becomes 23 again, and then it keeps going back and forth. This is what is called a balancing feedback loop. Okay, temperature goes up, the AC works. AC works, temperature goes down, okay, and then the AC stops, it goes up again, the AC will have to work on, and so on. Is this concept clear? Because actually these two, in 99% of the cases, they are the only loops that exist in nature. Something increases, the other thing increases, or something increases, the other thing decreases, and so on. This is how you can explain, our world at any point in time.
Yeah.
Sam, is this clear?
Yes, it's clear, yeah.
Okay, so let's take some examples and simple examples. I don't want to complicate things. How does those feedback loops happen in reality? Now, sometimes the previous slide was just one feedback loop. Sometimes it can happen, both of them together. Now, R means reinforcing, so it's either positive, and B is balancing. So let's see what happens here. You introduce a new product, okay? So the adopters, let's start with here. The adopters, they buy this product. They increase the word of mouth, and the adoption rate keeps increasing, okay? So there's a new iPhone, iPhone 19. It's a great iPhone, unlike all the previous ones. The adopters, they keep improving their word of mouth. Word of mouth reaches more people buy the iPhone, and so on. Now, does this mean that this will continue forever? No, actually not the case. There are usually other feedback loops that balances what is happening. So at the other time, after some time, the market is saturated. Okay, there is no more people to buy. Okay, so the potential adopters, they go down as well. Okay, and that's where you start seeing the balance in the market. So this is an example from a commercial perspective. What happens in reality when you introduce a new product. Another example is this one, which is quite interesting. Let's say that let's start with sales are down. Okay, so your sales are down. You have to do marketing promotions. When you do marketing promotions, the orders, they increase, okay? When the order increase, your backlog increases as well, okay? And then when you go back, the orders will start to decrease because you don't have the capacity to produce this anymore. And then your sales will go up again, and you don't need to do marketing promotions, okay? Now, sometimes those, they apply to all the products, sometimes they don't. But from a simple perspectives, as you see here, sales are down, we do promotions, orders increase, the sales are up. This means backlog, we don't have enough inventory, sales become down again, and then we have to do marketing promotions and so on. Okay, so the lesson here is that the world is hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of loops, so many things balancing each other. In some cases it's always positive, sometimes it's interacting with another balancing loop, so the effect goes down. The last example is one about the commercial office market space. Now this is actually 3 synchronized loops together. Now let's take the first one, which is a reinforcing loop. Now the business activity in a certain location increases. There's lots of business going on, so the location becomes more attractive to the leasers. Okay, so you find more clients who want to rent the office, and then the occupancy goes up. The occupancy is going up, but the business activity is still going up. So you keep on in this endless loop that it becomes more attractive, there are more occupants, and logically, there will be more people who want to rent more. However, there's another balancing loop, is that when you let's start with the building completion. The buildings are done, they're completed, so this increases the commercial space available. Occupancy increases, okay? Now there are no more spaces, the average rent would go down, and the new investments would go down again, okay? So this balances itself, this is the standard demand and supply in, I'll say, most of the countries. You keep on building, you cannot find a place, and then there is no more space, the rent goes down until we are able to build other buildings, the rent goes up again, and so on. Because the only thing would be, which is, for example, in some countries, Dubai in the last year, because they keep building and there is more people coming, it's a reinforcing loop, it's not a balancing loop. But in the years before, even before the COVID, because of the business activity, no, there was always balance between the rent and the occupancy. So I wanted to conclude with this in terms of what tools are there that will actually help us to visualize the system, understand the context, what is actually going on around us, as as a leader, or even as a person in a company, as a husband, as a father. It's very important to understand what is going on. And sometimes in life, because we fail to understand what is going on, we tend to have challenges as we move forward, in the same way like the Hertz CEO had all of those challenges. So, there has to be scientific tools to address this kind of complexity, which, as says on the slide here, in terms of the challenges we have, they are more intense, they're more complex, and they're happening more frequently. Okay, so with this, I conclude the webinar. Maybe I'll have some just points to add about strategy platforms, but this is the summary of the webinar, and I'm ready to answer any questions.
Excellent, Mohammed. About all the tools we've seen here. Again, I can see that when we link back to the strategy, we have extended the discussion about the tools there for the system thinking, but we did not. I was expecting really to have some part of the strategy. and how can this be used in formulating the strategy, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but it's excellent because yes, it gave excellent overview on the system thinking and the tools used in it.
Thank you. And actually, let me go forward now to understand what we do as strategy platforms. So, we have our YouTube channel where those webinars are posted. Our LinkedIn newsletter has been going for maybe one month or so. You can send us email at contact us at strategyplatforms.com. And most importantly, whatever you learn here, share it with others. I mean, part of my passion in doing this is, always trying to educate and develop others, and myself as well. I learn from the attendees. So, Hassan, back to your question. Now, what we're doing at Strategy Platforms is we're starting to have offerings perhaps from December, which goes into the details of what you just said. So, for example, how to understand the strategic foresight process. How to integrate organizations as systems, for example, how to integrate systems thinking with organization design. How do you, when you go through the whole strategy framework, which is from the very beginning all the way until you have the execution plan, how do you do it with systems thinking in place and with business architecture and business capabilities in place as well? Okay, not just because it looks like a good strategy. Okay, we hire 2 more people and we increase the budget by 5%, and there we go. No, this is not the way strategy succeeds. We also were planning another course for just leadership and complexity, which is today is like 10% of that. They're almost 2.5 days on how the leaders actually face complexity beyond the standard training of communication skills and leadership styles and so on, which is important. But the way complexity is increasing in today's world, it needs a totally different type of mindset. I mean, the brain for a leader 20 years back is totally different than a leader in today's world. So this is what we're planning to do starting December, inshallah. One by one, we'll announce those courses. Some of them might be in person, some of them might be online. And yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
Excellent comment.
Good. Okay. So so this is the end of our webinar. Thank you very much. This is the second one. We're going to post it on our YouTube channel and update this through LinkedIn as well. And hopefully the next webinar perhaps is going to be somewhere around 7 December. So we'll keep you posted, inshallah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Same to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.